Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Silverbauer. We'll get to that in slide 2. For now, I'm just going to tell you the name of my talk, which is Taming the Third-Party Vultures, a Google Tag Manager approach to data control. And we're going to be talking all about how to control, and this is incredibly important. I'm sure you've been hearing this all day because there's been some amazing panelists before me talking about why it's important to control your data. And so I'm not going to go too much into the why, but I will talk about the how to control your data. And how to do it technically, you leveraging tools, specifically Google Tag Manager to control the data flow out to third parties. So before I do that, let's get into me. I am Josh Silverbauer. I am the head of measurement and CRO at From the Future. That's ftf.co. We're an agency, performance agency. I am a tracking and analytics expert. I've been doing this for 12 years now. I'm a real human. I'm not AI, so you don't have to worry. You can ask me anything. I don't know if I'll have the response, unlike AI, but you can ask me anything. I love puzzles, which is what brought me to analytics, and I write rock operas with vague references to digital analytics. That's what Phil just mentioned. I'm also starting a talk show called Third Party Show with Josh Silverbauer, thirdpartyshow.com. You guys can check it out. All right, so you are what you send, folks. In the day and age of data privacy, it is incredibly important to have a general sense of what you are sending to platforms. Platforms are a bit of a black box in how they use data, right? You can generally understand somewhat of what you are sending, but you do not know how that platform is taking that data and using it, right? And so it's really important to have control over what you are sending. And, when you send data client side, you are kind of not really in control about what is flying out the door. It's really just going to take a feed of data and, grab that data and use that data, right? If you set up a pixel and, that's living on your website and you're sending that data directly from your website to Facebook or TikTok, it's just going to collect the request and take all that data, and you're not really sure what's going to happen on the other end, right? And these platforms, no offense to anybody who works for these platforms or anybody who's in the room, maybe who built the platforms, if Mark Zuckerberg is here right now, I'm sorry I'm about to say this, but they're greedy and hungry for everything. They're going to just gobble up whatever they want and take all the data they can, because data to them is money. And the more data they have, the more they can do to make money from this data, right? So they're greedy. They're going to take whatever they can. And if you are just using a client-side feed, it's going to be the maximum amount of data, including many things that you might not want to send if you are trying to be user privacy conscious. And honestly, you could get yourself in quite a bit of trouble by just sending anything, right? If you are sending user data, and you are in a region that you have to ask for consent, you might not even realize that you're sending user data with your client-side feed. And you could be. And so there's a lot of value to understand what is being sent. And a tool like server-side Google Tag Manager can help you identify what is being sent and control it. So here's a beautiful visualization for you of what these platforms are doing with this data. They're greedy, they're gluttonous, they are ingesting this data and doing whatever they want. So stop them from getting this data. There's a healthier approach. So what's the problem? We talked a little bit about it, but the problem with client-side data is that one, it's hard to enforce governance, right? You might accidentally deploy tags with sensitive, data like passwords and emails without even realizing it. You might leak sensitive information. So for instance, you might have like if somebody fills out a form and they go to a thank you page, there might be email and phone number in that request URL or in that URL, that page location URL, because sometimes they push that stuff in parameters. And if you don't even realize it, that data is going downstream regardless of if somebody has said that they can or can't send that, right? So, not having a general idea of what is in the data that's being sent through to these different platforms, you are putting yourself at increased liability. Under GDPR, sending any personal information without consent can, trigger very expensive fines for your company. So, making sure that you are adhering to consent, and also the data that's being sent through is within compliance, is going to be very valuable and helpful, and hopefully save you from being sued. And then just not being able to really truly modify the information that's being sent. So like once the tag fires, that request is being sent over to Facebook, and it's just gobbling up all of that information about that user device and the IP address or whatever else it wants to collect. It's just doing so because simply it's grabbing that from the pixel information. So enter server side. Woohoo. It's a beautiful imagery of what server side can do. Okay, you are sending it somewhere else to a server that you control, that you have ownership of. And once it gets there, you can essentially say, this is what you get, and this is what you don't get, right? And there's definitely some education that you will need to have to be able to understand what you can and can't send. You don't want to, break tracking. But this does give you so much more control over, user level data that you might not want a third-party platform to have. And it gives you ultimately the keys to the data that's being sent through. What are the benefits of server side? Well, one, you can control the data that gets sent through before it reaches the platforms. So, what server side allows you to do is you can, one, see the requests that are being sent before the request goes out to the third-party platform. You can modify that request we'll talk about the different methods of modification, but it allows you to decide what gets passed on to the third-party platform, right? You have this kind of in between before it gets to where you're able to manipulate that data before it goes out to the server, to the end platforms. So you become the gatekeeper of whatever data gets sent out. There's also, plenty of additional benefits to server side, like consolidating your data streams, right? Depending on how you want to set up a infrastructure for, the different types of platforms to get your data, you can consolidate all of that information into one data stream and then limit the data to kind of different groupings. So third party advertising platforms get this data, my analytics platforms get this data, right? So you can really control what platforms are getting what from one single data stream. So basically the way it works, for those who have never used server side, is basically data gets sent from the GTM client side. So if you have like a Google Tag Manager account that you're using for a regular client side account, instead of the client side sending directly to like a Facebook pixel template or like a Google Analytics template, you are instead sending to your own server. And then once the request reaches the server container, you're able to modify it there, right? So instead of sending direct to platform, it's going through this extra layer, which you have ownership of, and then ultimately you get to, control the data flow out. So when I say you get to control it, what does that really mean? And so there's this wonderful tool in server-side GTM called transformations. And within transformations, you have a few tools in that overall tool belt called transformations that allow you to change the information that gets sent out to the end user. So, joke here, I'll be right there. I just have to change first with a chameleon. So this is your transformations here. So GTM gives you 3 different options. Server-side GTM gives you 3 different options here to let you control what data gets sent out. And you get to decide what passes through, what gets blocked, and what gets modified. So the 3 main transformation types are allow, which basically you only let through what you approve, exclude, remove anything you don't want to share, and then augment, which allows you to add or modify the information to enhance or fix or change your data, right? And we'll go through each one of these and give you example scenarios of why you might use each one and what the benefits and drawbacks are of each one. Okay, so let's start with allow. Okay, so the allow transformation, basically what it does, it means that you are specifying only the parameters that are allowed to send to the platform, right? So for instance, you were saying, I'll take you and you and you, right? And nothing else. Only send these fields to Meta, right? And say you want to send just the event name, the value, the currency, and the transaction ID. That's all you want to send to Meta, right? So the allow, essentially gives you a boxes that you can put the actual parameters in that you say, I am saying that I want to only send these. So the benefits of that is you have the highest control, right? You are specifying exactly what parameters get through, right? So it's very restrictive. It's also very good for privacy because it helps you avoid unintentional leaking sensitive information, and obviously it's compliance friendly because you are specifying what information is allowed to get through. The problem with allow is really that you risk missing data, right? Critical data, right? Like this can be problematic because you can technically break tracking pretty easily, right? If you're not 100% sure what data needs to get sent through per platform, you risk basically breaking attribution and all of your tracking, right? So there's certain data that each platform needs for it to actually attribute a campaign to a purchase, for instance. And if you don't put that information in the allow list, you are essentially breaking your campaign attribution. It also takes a lot of maintenance because if parameters change or the data changes in your request, you would have to continually look to see what data is allowed, and potentially make modifications over time of what data is actually allowed or not. And then finally, it's much harder to scale. If you have like a lot of different events and a lot of different vendors that you want to send out different types of feeds to, you would have to have like a lot of different allow lists that would just kind of get really messy and also complicated to maintain. So this method, while really good for, overall control of your data, might not be the best if you are, trying to really scale your server side, feeds out to different platforms. Here's an example scenario. So like say I want to, basically only limit the necessary fields for Facebook to have. I could create, an allow parameters transformation here. And, I would essentially add in the different parameters I want to send. So I have here like the parameters to allow. So a request would come in. It would have a bunch of stuff in that request beyond of these, including user agent, IP address, all of this additional stuff. And I would say, well, ignore all of that except event name, value, currency, and transaction ID. Now, if I just did this, Facebook wouldn't really do much with this, right? It's would be like, okay, you were sending an event and I don't know what to do with it. So we would also need Facebook Click ID, Facebook Pixel, right, for better tracking and for it to be able to attribute. So there are certain, parameters that, each system needs or wants for the tracking to be efficient or even work at all. And you would just want to make sure to send that information over as well. Exclude. So this is basically, hey, you parameter, you right there, you can't come with me over to third-party platform, right? Don't send these fields to Meta. So this is the exact opposite of what we just looked at, right? So with allow, you are specifying the exact parameters that you are allowing to go through. With exclude, you are specifying what you don't want to go through. And the nice thing about this is it's more scalable, right? Like you are specifically calling out only things that you don't want. So everything else is moving through. If there's additional, like if you're not sure what needs to get sent and you just want to limit certain information from coming through, so I don't want to send IP address or the user agent or the device information, then I just have to say I don't want to send those too, right? And so this gives you a more flexible approach where it essentially allows you to remove specific parameters that you don't want leaking out. So for instance, I don't want, to be safe, I don't want anything that's labeled email or phone number or IP address. I don't want any of that stuff in my send over to these platforms. And so I could, specify in an allow or in an exclude, just, making sure that I don't have that those are going to be excluded from my feed over to the third-party platforms. This is great also for meeting specific requirements for privacy and compliance. If you know what information should not go to the platforms like emails and phone, and you want to limit that so that you are compliant, excluding those from the feed would help you be more compliant. And you don't need to touch everything else, right? Like with allow, you have to really go in there and see exactly every single field that you want to send versus this where you don't really need to touch anything except the fields that you don't want to send over. The drawback to this is it's a little bit of a reactive approach. Like you have to know what bad data exists in advance if you want to block it. And if you miss something, you could still be out of compliance, right? So you have to really pay attention to your feeds so that you know what's being sent out. It does take some ongoing monitoring because as new parameters are added potentially, or new forms are added or something else that might have additional fields that you might not want to leak, you would need to stay vigilant around how what data is essentially included in your exclude. And then it's also potential that you could still break stuff without knowing that you're breaking stuff. So like for instance, if you exclude important fields like the gclid or the Facebook pixel, right? Like that would break your tracking and you wouldn't necessarily obviously know. But you still need to be kind of educated around what is necessary to send versus what is unnecessary to send. So here's an example scenario. An example scenario would be my CMS, like WordPress, is automatically injecting emails and full name and phone number directly into the page URL on the send. So I don't want that because that's exposing that to the third-party platform without me specifying that I want that. So I want to exclude the page URL completely and then remove additional unnecessary data. So I'm excluding page URL, I'm excluding email, I'm excluding phone number and first name, right? I don't want any of that to be sent over to the platform. So I'm just saying, stop, do not send. Finally, augment. And augment is, kind of the most powerful. You would still probably use some of these in conjunction with each other. It's not an either or. It's not like I'm going to use only augment or I'm only going to use exclude, right? You would use some of these in combination, which I can show you when we get to the demo of like how we would approach having an augment with an exclude feed. But this allows you to essentially change the data before it goes out. And this can be really, really valuable because you can, send through hash data, you can enrich your data, you can add additional parameters, you can change the data feed. Then here's this beautiful image of you can come too if you wear these glasses, mustache, and trench coat, right? You're disguising the data in a way that might be valuable for you later or the platform, but you're not exposing it directly, to exposing like an email, for instance, or an IP address directly to the browser if you don't want to, or to the platform if you don't want to. So the nice things about this is that one, it's very customizable. You have the ability to change, that data feed to however you want to. So if you want to hash an IP address, you can do that. You can add on additional information. This really gives you complete control of what information goes out and what that information looks like. You can fix different gaps without kind of like exposing it to the client side. So like if you don't want, for instance, your email to be in the client side, but you do want to send your email for enhanced conversions to something like Facebook, you can send a unique ID or identifier or a transaction ID, for instance, if you're doing a purchase, downstream to server-side GTM. Server-side GTM could do a lookup table to, for instance, a Firestore database, some kind of database that's storing this information, pull in that email address, and then send that data out to the platform, right? And so you're not exposing that information over on the client side, which has some more security risks, and you can still send that over. So it gives you some ability to fix some gaps if you don't have all of that information on the client side, or if you don't want to send it on the client side, and allows you to do data enrichment, right, where you can make that data a little bit more robust. So say you just have a transaction ID and then you want to include additional information, and that additional information exists only on the server somewhere or in a database somewhere. You can modify and add those parameters, to your server-side send before they go out. Drawback of this is it's kind of complicated, right? What I just explained is relatively sophisticated in terms of a data setup. It doesn't have to be. Like we'll show an example, in the live demo of something that's really easy to do that it does give you a layer of protection where we can, hash essentially an IP address or hash an email address. But there are, this can go really, really deep in terms of the complexity around how you're pulling in data, enriching data, and then sending it out to platforms. And sometimes it's a little difficult to get right? Like, you have an extensive, if you have like an extensive amount of parameters that you're adding and you are also modifying certain things, right? You want to be aware of everything that you're building into these feeds, because, there's the more you change, obviously, the more there is to maintain and understand what's going out. So an example of this is adding a lookup. So an ad, for instance, if you want, there's two different kind of buckets that exist in Augment. There's add and then there's modify. And add allows you to add additional parameters on. So for instance, if we only want to send user ID, not email, not phone number, in the client side feed, right? And we want to send a hashed email for enhanced conversions or, to Meta, but you don't want to expose it on the client side, we can add a query to the Firestore to look up that, basically that email address and phone number based off of the user ID as a key. So this would be one way of doing it, which does not expose that information to the client side, which, can be a little less risky for a bit. And then modify, this is an example of this, is just hashing sensitive information before it goes out the door, right? So here's an example where I'm using a SHA-256 hasher that Simo Ahava built for server-side GTM, and it's basically hashing this email and augmenting that. So when email comes through from the client side to the server, it will then, before it goes out to Facebook, hash it and then send it out to Facebook. So it's a nice way of just making sure that that information is hashed before it gets exposed to Facebook. So what data do you actually need to send to third-party platforms? We have, the GCLID, Facebook Click ID, some kind of Click ID that's identifying it and, tying that back to a specific campaign. We have the event names like purchase or lead, conversion value, which is optional but important, right? Obviously, like for like return on ad spend and ROI, timestamp, when did the event happen, and if you are using enhanced conversions, some level of user identifiers. But there's also a lot that you don't need to send that is in the client request, which we can take a look at as well. So the point is, you don't need to send everything to get good attribution. And don't forget, you are in control of your data, right? You have the ability to, remember in the beginning, these gluttonous fiends taking this data. Well, you can send them stuff and it can still work, but you don't need to send them everything. And so having only the necessary go to them is a lot of a healthier relationship between you and that third party. Client-side tagging, to sum it up, bit of a black box. Server side gives you visibility, governance, and control, and the transformations are your toolbox for precision. Make your space mom proud. Send what you only need to, and be healthy. All right, so I know we're running a little tight, I think, on time here.
You've got 10 minutes, actually.
We got about 10 minutes, and I know we want to do some questions. So I'm just going to go through this live demo really quickly, just so you can see what I set up. So I set up a server. This is a server-side GTM. This is our From the Future website. When I click this button, work with us, I am sending from Google Client Side Tag Manager. You can see a button fire here on this link click, or this click right here, button to server. And that's now in my server side feed, right? We have this button click, which is being sent over to my server as opposed to directly to Facebook. And I have these two tags that fired. And basically what I have done in my GTM is I've created these different transformations where I have an allow parameters that is allowing through client ID, event location, engagement time, or so like the timestamp, GA session ID, page location, and that is just a bridging to my GA4 account, right? So if I look at the GA4 request, you can see that I have this modified event data here, And this is only sending through, or I only have the data that I've specified in my allow parameters, right? If I show the original, here's everything that gets sent. You can see there's a ton of additional stuff in here, but the final value in here is only pulling through what I've specified. So this GA session number is not pulling through, the language is not pulling through, the page referrer is not pulling through because I have set up that allow parameter. And when I look at that GA4 request here, you can see it's very, very light, right? It's only sending through what I'm specifying to go to GA4, okay? I also have this IP override, which is an augment event, which I am actually hashing. If you take a look at my variables here, I am hashing the IP override. So when I look at the transformations, I have this IP override, and I'm also excluding user agent from a Facebook tag that's going out. So if we look back at the information that's being sent from Facebook, which it failed right now because I put in a bad API. This is all just for example. But you can see that there's an outgoing request, and the IP address, client IP address, is this JUDTIZ. I am actually hashing that right before it goes out. So this is my hashed version of that IP override. So it's taking that hashed version, and we can see the originals here. So here's the original IP address and then the hashed version based off of my augmentation. I'm also not allowing for the user agent to come through. So all of the device data, and in the final send over to Facebook, that is not coming through either. So I'm using the exclusion to get rid of this user agent, and I'm using the augment to hash my IP address. And those are some real world scenarios where I'm actually taking this data and changing it, removing certain things before it gets over to the third-party platforms. And all of that data would be there in its full form if we are just sending it directly to the third party. So that's a little quick live demo around, obviously there's a lot that goes into that. So, obviously you can hit me up and I'll help you, with your overall setup. But I just wanted to show you how cool it is and how it works. Cool. So that's a little bit about, how to use server-side tagging to control your data. And bada bing, bada boom, you are in control. You got it. Go off and be cool data controlling. I think that sounds okay. Data controlling people. It's okay to control your data. Don't control other people.
That's cool. And love the photo there. I've also just put a link through to the third-party show, Analytics Plus Comedy. I've subscribed to that already, so I'm interested to see what's in that. So I mean, I'll just see if people give them a chance to kind of ask questions. The one thing I was going to ask, Josh, because we sometimes see with especially with Facebook, because normally Google Analytics 4, it doesn't really care about the Facebook click ID. It just causes kind of noise on the landing page. But if you're then claiming that inbound J4 request and sending it to Facebook, actually obviously you do need to send the Facebook click ID. So I think what you've proposed is a good way to kind of have your cake and eat it, in the sense that keep the GA4 pixel potentially clean or cleaner, but also then send the data that Facebook needs. I guess my almost kind of follow-up question is, does that then mean that we would need an augment for Facebook, Bing, Snapchat, or any account where it needs specific thing but only for it?
So you could do so depending on how you set up your data feed, you can send all of those client side, right? Just take all those cookies and send them client side to the server side, and then just exclude them based off of the platform that is getting them, right? So an exclusion for GA4, I would not include any of those click IDs or anything like that, right? But then if I wanted to send out to Facebook with that same feed, I would just create an exclusion for the GA4 information that I don't need and just have the Facebook information. It's all the same feed. It's just what data do I actually need in these different platforms from that feed, right? So you wouldn't really need to augment it. You're just kind of excluding the ones that don't really matter for the different platforms there. So you would just have different exclusions based, like a different exclusion transformation tag per platform that you're sending it to. And then you could apply it to any of the Facebook tags that go out. So if you like want to, like in your transformations, you could include anything that, like has Facebook in the title of it, for instance, so that you can just do one full kind of transformation for all Facebook tags.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, have you experimented with like third-party tools like Stape as well as just
Yeah, I like going through State because it's an easy setup. You can get that, if you go through the Google Cloud run, it's just like it's painful oftentimes to set up, and Stape is really quick, and they give you a free tier if you're doing 10,000 or less requests per month. So there's value, I think, in the Stape configuration. I just set up this server this morning with Stape just for this example. For like, it took me about 10 minutes to set that up, in terms of that. So like, it's a pretty quick and easy setup from like get a server stood up to be able to do this type of functionality.
Yeah, I think we at our previous event there was a 20% off Stape discount code. I'll have to sort of send it to attendees afterwards. And just on that note about Stape, as we moved clients over from the like Simo's Facebook template on server side to Stape's one, partly because Simo said don't use his one, and also he was recommending Stape. So because one thing that is quite good is there's some extra options kind of on that with, like, for instance, the Facebook client side tag does kind of click collection and like buttons and everything else, which gets turned off if it's just changed over to server side only. So that was kind of a bit of a like lesson learned for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's like another key reason why to do this is when you do client side tagging, there's a bunch of additional, events that get fired automatically, right? That you have no control over. And when you do server side, you have exactly the amount of control that you want with specific events that get sent, right? So you're controlling more that feed to the different platforms versus letting them do whatever they want from an automatic tagging perspective.
Yeah, we on a slightly different note, I'll just put this in chat. We did for one project, we did a whitelisting on client side. So we actually truncated, so we basically just whitelisted UTM tags, and then so it kind of cleaned the landing page. It was a site that they didn't want to risk capturing kind of email addresses and whatnot. Or I've seen, I think, for instance, Segment as an example defaults to only sending the page path, not page path plus query string. So I have seen some kind of other creative solutions to try and kind of either clean it before it goes in, or as you mentioned, like make sure that it the information doesn't go to the wrong place. Because, for instance, especially like using cookies, people forget that if you store something as a cookie, it gets sent to all like network requests, like regardless of whether it's meant to be or not. So there's definitely more control on server side, and a lot kind of cleaner. I almost wonder if there's a ways of kind of doing some bulk automations, like auto migration from, let's say, Microsoft Bing client side to server side, or the same with Facebook. It'd be nice if it was like pulled in the account ID, maybe pulled in the token from the Facebook API, and just made that process a little bit kind of cleaner, better, faster.
Yeah, definitely. There's still like a lot of technical know-how that you have to do to get to this, and I think there's some solutions out there that help with it, but it's still a relatively technical topic no matter what.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones, if you get it wrong, it kind of because server side becomes a primary dependency because it's loading GTM or loading Stape and then loading those kind of downstream hits. It's sort of like super important that people kind of set it up correctly.
Yeah.
So we haven't had any questions. But will your people fill in your feedback form we can kind of relay questions through to you. Just last question I was going to ask Josh. What's your on your kind of third party show? What's the next talk going to be?
So this is a new thing for me.
Mm.
It's a new season.
Right.
I will be releasing our first talk
Right.
on Monday.
Right.
Just who's going to be on it and stuff. But I
Right.
will give you a clue that the first conversation surrounds analytics.
Mhm.
The the third party show is going to be full digital marketing, but this
Mm.
first talk is going to be specifically analytics. So definitely join in if you are interested in data, and we'll have some fun.
That sounds really cool. I'm gonna have to send you. I've got a analytics comedy list, like a
Oh,
playlist
please do.
on YouTube, which I'll ping across. And I did just whilst we're on the call, I found my rap video, which I'll chuck
Oh
in
my gosh,
chat if you want a bit of a giggle.
love it.
Uh, the Thank you so much for presenting today, Josh. There's some really useful bits and pieces within there, and I like the approach of kind of controlling that data server side. I wonder if maybe if people could reach out to you if they want to get like recipes or